Hey everybody, welcome back to L-Man Gaming. Today I got for you the Resident Evil 4 Remake review. And as you can see here, I actually just finished and got the Platinum Trophy just recently. Uh, you
You
know,
really are the best.
want to put in that work to make sure that I'm giving you the best review possible. So if you don't know, Resident Evil 4 is my favorite game of all time. Really, it probably is, but more importantly, it's the most replayable game I've ever played. And the good news is the remake is even more replayable. So I'm going to do this review. I'm just going to kind of break up the overview of my overall thoughts, and then we're going to break down the village and castle and the military base. So my overall thoughts with the game is that, man, it's going to be really hard to go back to the original at this point just because of the modernness of it, right? The gameplay, the graphics, it definitely feels just updated to where, like this is the definite version now. So again, it's going to be really hard to go back and to that extent because of just where the gameplay is at. So even though the gameplay has been improved upon and is definitely the definite version there, some of my biggest gripes with the game kind of come down to the fact that the characters, the kind of thematic, tone of it, that absolutely has definitely been changed. In fact, I got no problem kind of saying that the a lot of the characters are straight downgrades. Um, like the only characters I think are better, Ashley's better, the Merchant's better, and I think Leon's kind of like neutral. But every other character has been a straight downgrade in a lot of different kind of ways, which is definitely disappointed because that was one of the fun things about the original game, something that like you look forward to, kind of from those cutscenes. But then there's something else to even be said too with how the original kind of kept this campy feel and it was kind of silly in some ways, but it really still maintained that survival horror. This is just straight kind of more survival horror, and that campiness has kind of been taken out, which again it is a real shame because it worked really well for the first one. So I don't know why like this kind of modern audience needs to take it on like be a more serious take. It worked for the first one, and I think even now in this time, some of the dialogue per se, might have still need to be a little different, but it still should have worked pretty well. For me personally, really quite I mean, really, the biggest tragedy in the remake, I think, I mean, right, there has been some cut content. The laser room, U3 It, that was cut. I'm not so torn up about U3 It, the boss fight. It still would have been nice to have it, but really, not having the laser room, that felt like a slap in the face. That one actually felt like a slap in the face for some reason. Um, and we kind of know they have the technology too, right? Like, if you got to the military island, like, they have the laser turrets, like, we know they have lasers. That was just again such a cool moment from the original game um, that I just don't know why they would take that out. Kind of baffling there, and it was a real treat. But more so too, um, I think the biggest travesty is really like with the QuickTime events. Because what made the original so unique too was that you had a cutscene and you couldn't put down the controller because you potentially could die. And all that tension's kind of like been cut out now, which is really just a shame. Things like the Del Lago boss fight, you think like you're done and then the rope ties around like your leg and you have to like cut it with like a cutscene. Like those are good QuickTime events, right? See, I don't know what happened to like the gaming industry. It was like there's bad QuickTime events and there's actually good QuickTime events. They're good when they don't directly like tie to like gameplay moments, kind of like when like you're in that kind of like flow, right? You don't want to like disrupt flow. If the QuickTime event can actually add to the flow, it's good. And the only ones we have in this game are like for dodges against like certain bosses. But then there's another travesty with that too, though. There's only one button for a QuickTime event, like a dodge, I guess. Right, I guess it's not even a QuickTime event. It's just technically you call it like a prompt dodge, I guess. That is like because it's only like the thumbstick or like the crouch button whenever like you have it bound to. In the original, there was other options, so you can never like guess. Like you always have to, be able to react to the button prompt, right? The QuickTime event. And this one, you always know it's going to be dodged, so it's very easy to always get right. Uh, that's kind of disappointing. But again, more so back to the QuickTime events. What made them so good was like the cutscenes. There's always like fear of death. Uh, so I think that is an extreme travesty, and again, it sucks that in their mind. I remember some of the articles when this came out, thinking that, oh yeah, QuickTime events, these are bad. It's like no, like they're actually really good, the way like the original like did it. So again, I hated to see that be cut. And then again, kind of back to that tone though. I mean, that's what made the first one again so fun in a lot of ways. Was because the characters would like call you up sometimes on like your comms and even like stories. There's some really interesting story changes that I really did not like. Like Saddler, right, the main final boss. You don't even see him in person until late in the game. He shows up at the church in the original, and that was awesome. That was actually awesome, and how he was more involved. So things like that. And like I said, with the character, Salazar is just strictly worse. I mean, really, he's even missing his hat too. It's just a dang shame why they kind of did these things. So, what I'm getting at is like while this gameplay, the graphics have just been tremendously updated, and this is like the definite version of that. In that extent, it's like dang, like I wish they could have been like a little bit more faithful because like their reimaginings are great, but they didn't need to really kind of reimagine some of this stuff. Like this is the crane level, like this reimagining is insane, right? In the original game, this was like a small little tiny room and not even like an actual like crane machine. So those kind of like reimaginings. This was when the game is at like its best, not when it decided to we need to, you know, make this character different and now make that kind of story like different. I don't mind some of those smaller changes, like what they did with like Lewis was like great. But yeah, just really disappointed that they kind of decided to change that much. I don't think they needed to, and again, overall, it really did work to the game's disadvantage. It did not actually help the game. In my opinion, it made it worse. I think they could have really had a good balance there, but they got off track there. They focused too more on like their themes. I think they could have kept the tone of this more serious take while still maintaining a lot of like the original, and then improve upon it from there. So just very sad to see that, right? Again, where the gameplay has been improved upon, all the kind of what made the game have its charm has been gone, and all of it's taken away now. So let's actually get into the village, right? I'm gonna break down the village, castle, and military base now. Overall, the village, I think the village is actually better now. In fact, like much better. Really, like the best, like backtracking, kind of connected levels, especially when you get to like the lake. It's freaking awesome. It's really awesome, and I like a lot of these kind of pacing changes, and how some of these, when you play like the harder difficulties, some of like these chain events that you have to go through, like the battle arenas you can call them, it just blows your mind. It is really a true challenge when you're playing like the harder difficulties and trying to like earn some of these specific trophies and achievements. So Village absolutely is better. The only negative thing I have to say is I have seen some other people mention this, like the beginning of the game, I wish it could have had kind of a little bit more tension to build up to. And then besides that, Del Lago, the boss fight though, that is actually I think the only boss fight that's like strictly worse. It just feels completely lifeless and like on rails. I remember the original Del Lago, the lake monster, it was just something really cool and like kind of like terrifying. And quite difficult. When you actually kind of like realize that it's very scripted in this game, it kind of takes the fun out of it. Like it really is like an on rails theme ride, and you can just hold left the entire time and just it's not scary. And so those are like really the only kind of two negative things. And the castle though, the castle unfortunately I do think it's actually a smidge worse. It's a little worse, and I'll tell you why. Because what made the castle so good in the first game, or at least a little bit better, was that it had like a lot of death traps. I mean, the village had like the bear traps, right? That was kind of like the unique theme for the village, right? You can get caught in these and like the tripwires and stuff. The castle, there was no death traps. The original, you had like the ceiling falling down. You had like that machine that would come out and you had to like shoot the guy in it, or he would like smush into like the wall. So I would just love to see kind of like those ideas, right? Like they could have done some really cool, interesting, like new stuff. And instead we just get this, jump into a room and like more enemies spawn, right? Which is like the whole game, but in its own like unique twist for the castle. But we needed more of these kind of just like non-enemy threats in like the castle, and that had to go along with the overall like again like the trap rooms, kind of like Saw-esque, and that's what the castle was really missing. So yeah, the castle needed some more of those kind of like death traps, and again, the pacing just a smidge off too. And again, I think if you had those kind of some of those death trap rooms where it was just focused on more puzzles to like survive, right? Like actual puzzle that could kill you if you didn't solve it right. That's what the castle like needed more of to help with that pacing. But again, we see really good level design and going through like the game. And then to the military base, The military base, I actually would say it's actually neutral. I don't really think it improved per se or like got worse. I think this one actually really kind of kept the most faithful in like a way you could argue too, which is interesting because I didn't help or really hinder it either. I just want to give a shout out to the Krauser, like the Krauser fight. It's the best boss in the original game, and that, out of all the bosses, they really kept the original design and like how faithful it is, and it just feels great. That Ratatouille meme, right? Like cue the Ratatouille meme because like the nostalgia just kicks in. It's like holy crap! Like they made this fight modern, but it's the same as I like remember. It's like how do they do that? Like how do they make it so modern and different, but it's still the same thing? It's like kind of what I wanted to see with like the entire game. So the Crusher fight was fantastic. I think the Saddler fight, the final boss, kind of a little disappointing. I don't like the bug so much. Like seems kind of cheesy, and it's like takes away from the actually focusing on the final boss. It would have been cooler if like they swarmed around him and like shoot the bugs off him to like reveal weak points. I think that would have been kind of cool. But yeah, military base neutral. So right, so we have village better, castle a little worse, and the military base kind of like neutral. So you know, again, I was kind of hoping maybe to kind of like see more there, like overall, because the village is just really good, and then the castle is just so fast without like those death traps and pacing, and the military base because you do cut out the laser room and U3. There really isn't like kind of much to look forward to besides like Krauser. But overall, still good changes, and again, like I said, it keeps it modern. So that's kind of the whole. This is really kind of what I have to really kind of tussle with here is that did I really just want kind of this game, but a one-for-one remake? Would that have been better than this? And the truth is, seeing what they've already done with this at this point, and again, that doesn't mean necessarily with the story. I'm talking about like straight gameplay, because right, how they reimagine shit is amazing. They absolutely did reimagine things the correct way. So knowing that, it's like, did I really want that one-for-one remake? And I think the answer is, again, I had to think very hard about this, and this is why I decided like to platinum the game because I wanted to really think as much as possible. And I think, yeah, I absolutely actually just did a one-for-one remake. Again, they could have changed the story and how they have it and done some different things, but really, yeah, I would just like to see the stories kept the same kind of campiness a little bit. The changes like with Lewis would have been fine, right? And just like reimagine like every section, but kept it because here's really what it comes down to, right? Is this game a masterpiece? Because I can promise you this one, the original Resident Evil 4 is a masterpiece for sure, right? It's one of the most defining games we ever had in terms of third-person shooters and what it did for the Resident Evil franchise. And again, I think long and hard about this, and I really wanted to give this, right? I wanted this to be the game, the first one to have that masterpiece seal of approval for the channel. But unfortunately, I'm not going to give it to it. I'm not. This game is just a solid 5 out of 5. And in some ways, it does deserve more. It deserves its own reward. I don't know what that is, but I don't think it's a masterpiece because we already have the masterpiece. So for them to remake their masterpiece, when a game is just that good, it's like, how could they really have screwed this up, right? Even if they half-assed this, I'm not saying they did, but even if they half-assed this, with how good the original game is, what we would have got would have still been freaking crazy good, right? And we can definitely tell that they put in more work than just half-assing it. And what we get is something pretty damn close. But ultimately, I do think it falls short. To the original game. Not just in terms of gameplay, but that's only because, again, right, it's just modern game. Like, so what? So what? It's been 20 years, and you're telling me it plays better? Like, oh, wow. It's been 15, 20 years, and it plays better. Like, congratulations. Like, they managed to do the fucking minimum, and to that extent. But they definitely kept it pretty interesting and stuff. But again, that's just kind of what I'm going to go with at the end here, guys. I think they should have definitely kept things more faithful. I don't think it was kind of needed to change a lot of these things. And I'd love to hear your comments about that, right? Did you prefer the original, or do you prefer the remake? Because again, I'll say this last comment on this, right? As good as the first game is, it's just too old now, right? That game had its time. I played that game to death, and now I've played this game to death, and I'm going to keep playing this game a little bit. I'm going to do like a yearly playthrough probably, because that's just what it means to be modern. But that doesn't mean that just because it means just because that's what it means to be modern does not mean that's what it means to be better. And unfortunately, it's not.